There are doors humanity has never dared to open. Behind them lies not gold or power, but secrets buried deep for thousands of years. Ancient symbols that once seemed meaningless, mysterious texts long swallowed by the shadows of time, now for the first time in history, have been unlocked by artificial intelligence. And the most terrifying part, it's not that we failed to decode them, it's that we finally understood them. And what we found was far more horrifying than silence. In 2025, a group of scientists using advanced AI technology announced a discovery that shook the world. For the first time ever, entire ancient languages once deemed undecipherable, like the Rongorongo script of Easter Island, Linear A from Crete, and the mysterious Etruscan writing, had been completely decoded. The announcement immediately captured global attention, from elite archaeologists to everyday history enthusiasts. The world turned its eyes to this breakthrough, with a mix of excitement and unease. At first, people believed AI would open a new golden age of archaeology, helping humanity better understand the origins and development of civilization. But just months after decoding these ancient texts, experts began to realize the truth. The secrets they uncovered were far from harmless wisdom of the past. What they had revealed were warnings, truths deliberately hidden, and detailed records of brutal conspiracies, all etched into seemingly innocent symbols. Dr. Eleanor Hayes, one of the lead researchers on the AI project, described her first experience reading an AI-generated translation of ancient Mayan script. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. What we assumed were simple rituals turned out to be horrific ceremonies involving blood and the lives of thousands of innocent people. And that was just the beginning. With each passing day, more ancient texts were run through the AI, and each new translation brought even more disturbing revelations. The scientific community was shaken. Global media quickly gave this phenomenon a chilling name: the language of shadows. Those once harmless ancient characters had become the center of a worldwide debate. Whispers began to spread. Had humanity accidentally opened a door that was never meant to be opened? Questions multiplied across online forums, social media, and even in everyday conversations around dinner tables. Was our endless curiosity leading us into secrets too terrifying to bear? And perhaps most haunting of all, why had the great civilizations of the past gone to such lengths to bury these truths so carefully? What were they protecting us from? For some, these findings were a thrilling invitation to dig deeper. For others, they were a dire warning. As new translations emerged, many began to feel that history wasn't just forgotten. It had been intentionally erased, hidden, sealed away for reasons we were never supposed to question. And now, we had forced those secrets back into the light. In this growing storm of questions and fear, one unsettling idea took hold. Maybe history didn't want to be remembered. And so in this video, Bedtime History will walk beside you, not to calm your mind, but to take you deeper into the most terrifying revelations ever unlocked by AI from ancient languages. Proceed with caution as you follow this series, because once you step into the world of ancient mysteries unlocked by artificial intelligence, there's no going back. These are not bedtime stories, these are historical truths, and each one carries a dark warning from the past, a warning humanity once chose to forget. And now let us begin the journey into a realm where every secret uncovered is also a shadow cast, where each decoded word carries not just knowledge, but a message, a warning buried in history. One last echo from a forgotten world. But the real question is, do we still have time to turn back? Over 5,000 years ago, along the mighty banks of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, one of humanity's earliest civilizations emerged from the fertile lands of Mesopotamia. This was the Sumerians, credited by the modern world as the inventors of the wheel, writing, law, and astronomy. But behind that shining legacy, hidden beneath layers of time, were dark secrets. Secrets buried for millennia, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Cities like Uruk, and Lagash were renowned for their grand temples, majestic monuments, and the world's first system of writing, cuneiform. Scholars long believed that these wedge-shaped inscriptions were mere records of history, trade, and religious rituals. That belief would be shattered when artificial intelligence began reading deeper into the ancient clay tablets. With capabilities far beyond the human mind, AI didn't just translate. It connected long-forgotten fragments scattered across centuries. Seemingly unrelated records began to merge, revealing a haunting picture of a world no modern person could ever have imagined. What was once dismissed as dull or redundant now formed a narrative that chilled even the most seasoned researchers. One of the most infamous artifacts analyzed was Tablet Uruk 217, found in the temple of the goddess Inanna. Initially, scholars assumed it described a simple rain-making ritual. But when AI dissected the symbols in full, a horrifying truth emerged. It was a record of gruesome human sacrifice, performed in hopes of earning the gods' protection. The ancient characters appeared on screen, sharp and cold, like a voice echoing from the underworld. When darkness cloaks the land and the moon turns crimson, 10 youthful souls shall be offered to Inanna. Their blood must flow down the sacred stone, their flesh consumed by fire, that the goddess be pleased, and ruin pass over our city. According to AI's interpretation, these horrifying ceremonies weren't isolated events. They were recurring rituals, performed whenever disaster loomed, whether it be war, plague, or ominous signs from the heavens. The victims were often children or virgins, carefully selected and sacrificed by high-ranking priests. As AI delved further into Sumerian writings, more such rituals came to light. One clay tablet from Lagash detailed a mass sacrifice meant to stop a plague. When Namtar, god of pestilence, breathes death upon the city, the high priest shall select 100 pure lives, sacrifice their bodies, mix their blood with clay to build a new wall, a wall that disease cannot pass. The chilling part wasn't just the content, but the calm, matter-of-fact tone in which the Sumerians described these acts. These were not secretive texts, they were formal records, carefully preserved, as if human sacrifice was a normalized, even necessary part of life. And then the most terrifying discovery emerged, prophetic warnings about the very end of their civilization. On tablet, 132, AI translated the final message of a priest named Enshar. He claimed it was a divine revelation. The gods have spoken, our city will burn in fire. The Euphrates will run with blood. No soul shall remain to speak of the sorrow. For mankind has gone too far, and the gods no longer forgive our pride. What made these words so terrifying wasn't just the prophecy itself, but how eerily accurate it turned out to be. In recorded history, the great cities of Sumer were indeed destroyed by war, natural disasters, and social collapse, just as the tablet had warned thousands of years earlier. Through the lens of AI, we came to understand the Sumerian mind, their culture, obsessions, and the darkness at the heart of their rituals and prophecies. But perhaps the most horrifying truth isn't buried in the past. It's in the way the Sumerians accepted all of it, sacrifice, doom, divine fury, as part of everyday life. What could have driven such a powerful civilization into this abyss? Was there something or someone pulling the strings behind the scenes? In the deep silence of history, the Sumerians' voice still echoes like a warning from the underworld, one we never wanted to hear. And perhaps the most terrifying secrets are still waiting to be uncovered in the next ancient texts AI will unlock. In 2012, the world held its breath, awaiting the end of days, as foretold by the ancient Mayan prophecy. But when that day came and passed uneventfully, many laughed it off as a harmless joke, a naive misunderstanding of ancient records. And yet, as artificial intelligence dug deeper into the deciphering of Mayan texts, a more disturbing truth emerged. The 2012 prophecy was not a misunderstanding. It had meaning, just not the meaning we thought. The Maya were one of the most advanced and mysterious civilizations of ancient America. They were famed for their astonishingly precise calendars, their astronomical knowledge far beyond their time, and their majestic temple cities. But behind the brilliance and the wisdom lay a chilling tradition, one built on blood, horrifying human sacrifice. The ancient texts decoded by AI revealed that the Mayans did not merely sacrifice humans to please the gods. They did so to stop something they called the cycle of eternal darkness. This belief was documented with eerie clarity in inscriptions found at ancient cities like Tikal, Chichen Itza, and Palenque. One text, reconstructed by AI from Chichen Itza, sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. It became known as the Stone of Shadows, a detailed record of a 5,125-year cycle ending in the year 2012. But rather than describing a literal apocalypse, the stone read, "When the long cycle closes, darkness shall not arrive in a single breath, but creep slowly into the hearts of mankind. It is not the end, but the beginning. A time of chaos, war, plague, and hunger shall unfold." So, 2012 was not the world's end, but the start of something darker. A new age in which humanity would descend, gradually and painfully, into growing instability. And looking back at the world since 2012, it's hard to deny how disturbingly accurate that prophecy now seems. As AI explored more texts, it uncovered increasingly gruesome rituals. One record from Tikal described a terrifying blood ceremony where priests would draw blood from their own bodies and those of the sacrificed to offer to the gods. Blood is the only bridge through which the gods may hear us. The body of the offering shall be raised atop the temple. A heart, still beating, shall be cut and given, so that the cycle of darkness may not consume our world. These rituals were not symbolic, they were essential to Mayan spiritual practice. Human blood was considered sacred, the life force through which communication with divine powers flowed. Sacrifice was their way of pleading with gods they feared as much as they revered. The city of Palenque, ruled by the legendary King Pakal, also left behind chilling texts. One inscription from his tomb, reconstructed by AI, vividly described repeating cycles of catastrophe. When the darkness awakens, serpents of fire shall crawl from the earth, blood shall rain from the sky, the ground will dry, and crops will perish. The survivors shall suffer endlessly. Only sacrificial blood may delay the darkness for one more cycle. History proved the Maya were no strangers to devastation, prolonged droughts, civil wars, and ultimately the mysterious collapse of their civilization in the 9th century AD. Historians once believed their fall was due to climate change or internal strife. But now, with AI's help, a deeper truth is surfacing. The Maya believed they were cursed, not because of ignorance, but because of how deeply they understood the rhythms of the cosmos. They saw the end coming, they feared their knowledge, and they fought it with blood. The greatest secret AI revealed about the Maya wasn't just their brutal rituals or ominous prophecies, it was their terrifying awareness that human history moves in endless cycles of darkness, and that we always stand at the edge of the next collapse. Perhaps the horror lies not in their sacrifices, but in the dawning realization that their fears are now becoming ours. Are those ancient warnings really about us? Are the dark cycles beginning again? In the shadows of history, the voice of the Maya still whispers, cold and quiet, into the ears of those willing to listen. In the heart of the vast Pacific Ocean, far from any continent, a small and isolated island has captivated human curiosity for centuries. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is famed for its hundreds of towering moai statues, their silent, solemn faces guarding a secret that seems forever beyond human understanding. But the massive moai statues are not the island's greatest mystery. For centuries, the world has wondered what happened to the native Rapa Nui people, a civilization that seemed to vanish mysteriously almost without a trace. At the center of this enigma lies Rongorongo, an incredibly complex system of glyphs created by the Rapa Nui. For hundreds of years, scholars failed to decipher it. But when artificial intelligence finally broke the language barrier, messages of desperation and horror began to emerge, whispering from these ancient wooden tablets. The once dismissed glyphs came alive, raw and painful, as if narrating the final confession of a civilization that destroyed itself. The first message AI decoded from the Mamari tablet stunned the scientific community. The island has no more trees, the forest is gone, the land is dead. We have offered blood to the gods, but the gods no longer listen. We are dying, and no one is coming. Once a lush paradise, Easter Island was home to thriving forests and abundant food. But the texts revealed a cruel truth. The Rapa Nui collapsed not because of fate, but because of their own greed, arrogance, and blind faith in their own power. Another tablet, the Aruku Kurenga, held a haunting confession about the construction of the giant moai statues. We built statues for our ancestors, begging for their protection. But to move them to sacred grounds, hundreds of trees were cut down, the land was ruined. Now the ancestors watch in silence as we kill each other for scraps of food. The AI found other passages detailing hunger, tribal war, and unimaginable despair. From the Tahua tablet came a chilling account. The ground is covered with the dead, the children cry without sound, the tribes slaughter one another to survive. We have lost everything. Now, only despair remains. One tablet after another told the same tragic story of a society facing total ecological collapse, spiraling into chaos and violence. Another inscription described how desperate everyday life had become. We hide every sweet potato, every small fish. If anyone finds them, the price is death. Killing is no longer strange. The strong survive another day. But the most haunting discovery came from the KT tablet, a clear message that the Rapa Nui had seen their end coming and couldn't stop it. The AI translated a grim, hopeless line. We saw where our path would lead, but no one listened to the warnings. Everything was in vain. Death chose us, and no one could change that. These were not myths. They were not metaphor, they were records, honest, desperate, and devastating, of a people watching themselves perish. Easter Island's downfall was not caused by mystery, but by self-destruction. And the most terrifying part of the AI's translations wasn't the Rapa Nui's despair, but their clear awareness of what they were doing. They knew they were killing their future and could not stop. AI reconstructed these messages with painful clarity, painting a vivid portrait of a once vibrant civilization that slowly consumed itself. The Moai statues that once symbolized strength and pride now appear not as monuments of triumph, but as solemn witnesses to a society that tore itself apart. The Rapa Nui didn't vanish mysteriously. They died silently in isolation, their last cries carved into wood, waiting centuries for someone to finally hear them. And now, AI has made those cries audible again. This is no longer a story about a lost island in the Pacific. It's a warning, because the most disturbing thing about the Rapa Nui is not their end, it's how familiar their story feels today. Are we repeating their path, blinded by ambition, deaf to the warnings, convinced that the end will never come? And when it does, will anyone listen? As the cold wind moves across Easter Island, the desperate messages of the Rapa Nui still echo, not in voice, but in silence. A haunting reminder carved into wood and left for us, the last readers. Will we listen before it's too late? Göbekli Tepe, quietly resting on the barren highlands of southeastern Turkey, remains one of the most confounding mysteries in human history. This is a place so ancient that when its first stones were raised, humanity was still living in the age of hunters and gatherers, thousands of years before any known civilization arose. When Göbekli Tepe was first uncovered, archaeologists were stunned. The site held massive T-shaped stone pillars over 5 meters tall, each weighing dozens of tons, intricately carved with animals and strange symbols no modern mind could fully decipher. These mysterious carvings stayed silent under layers of earth, as if waiting for the right moment to speak. That moment came when artificial intelligence finally succeeded in analyzing the strange symbols on the pillars and surrounding stones. What the AI uncovered was not mere decoration or ordinary text, but a series of short, chilling messages, vivid descriptions of mass human sacrifices performed at this sacred site. The very first translation from the central pillar left archaeologists speechless. Human blood is the door. When the sun dies, new life will return, only when blood flows across the sacred stones. But this was just the beginning. More stones were decoded, each echoing the same brutal theme. Detailed rituals involving young, healthy individuals chosen for sacrifice to appease mysterious entities referred to as the Watchers of the Sky. One smaller stone, decoded by AI, described the ritual in haunting detail. Choose the strongest. Bring them to the largest stone on the day the sun dies. Let their blood spill upon the stone, so the gods may receive life and not abandon us to darkness. These revelations shook the academic world. Göbekli Tepe was not just a site for prayer or worship. It was a grand theater for ritual sacrifice, on a scale unseen in early human history. AI also uncovered new meaning behind the animal carvings on the pillars. Snakes, birds, scorpions, and lions, once thought to be harmless symbols of nature, were in truth representations of powerful and terrifying gods, each demanding blood to remain satisfied. Of all these, the serpent appeared most frequently, and AI offered a grim interpretation. The serpent is the guardian of the gate to the other world. Only through sacrifice may the gate open and souls be reborn into new life. Most frightening of all were the messages documenting the sheer scale of these sacrifices. One inscription recorded the chilling total of a single ritual. Today, 500 were offered to the gods. Blood ran red over the stone. Now we may know peace for one more season. These sacrifices weren't rare. They were ritual cycles, repeated over centuries. Göbekli Tepe wasn't just a holy site. It was the centerpiece of an organized, bloody system of belief passed down for generations. AI's discoveries shattered earlier assumptions. The people of Göbekli Tepe were not merely primitive hunter-gatherers. They were a deeply spiritual, tightly structured society with a sophisticated and brutal system of religious practice. The pillars of Göbekli Tepe, once thought to be monuments to peace, were altars, sacred tables for some of the bloodiest rituals ever recorded. And as AI completed the translation of the final stones, one question emerged, one that disturbed even the most seasoned researchers. Was Göbekli Tepe an isolated case, or simply the first piece of evidence from a forgotten age of ritual blood and fear? What happened here may not be an exception, but a glimpse into a terrifying chapter of humanity we've just begun to understand. The events at Göbekli Tepe are more than ancient tragedy. They are a warning, a reminder of how far humans have always been willing to go to confront their fears. Even before civilization, before writing, before cities, we were already building temples of blood. We sacrificed one another in hopes of controlling the unknown, and perhaps, even then, we were already losing control. Göbekli Tepe still stands in silence, its stones staring across the barren earth. They no longer whisper myths, but cold truths. Truths of fear, sacrifice, and the violent roots of belief. Perhaps it was here, at Göbekli Tepe, that humanity first faced the harshest lesson of all, that our deepest fears do not come from the gods, but from within ourselves. And that lesson we still refuse to face. For over 2,000 years, the Library of Alexandria has been remembered as the greatest symbol of ancient human knowledge. Legends say it once held more than 500,000 scrolls, containing nearly everything known to humanity at the time. But its fate became one of the greatest tragedies of the ancient world, a legendary fire that burned nearly the entire archive of human wisdom to ashes. However, when artificial intelligence began analyzing scorched fragments of ancient texts recovered from the ruins, the story of Alexandria's fire took a darker and colder turn, one far different from what history had long recorded. AI was able to reconstruct fragments once thought lost forever, especially private letters and notes from scholars and librarians, revealing a chilling tale of political conspiracy and the deliberate destruction of knowledge. One letter, recovered from charred papyrus, was written by a librarian named Cleon to a friend in Athens. It delivered the first disturbing clue. The scrolls did not burn by accident. They were ordered to be destroyed, the ones they feared the most. We are witnessing the murder of knowledge, an intellectual assassination unlike any before. Historians had long believed the fire was either an accident or collateral damage from war. But the texts restored by AI told a very different story. An internal library record reconstructed by AI described events just before the blaze. Soldiers arrived under the cover of night, following direct orders from the highest ranks. They carefully selected which scrolls would burn first, works on political philosophy, forbidden astronomy, and true histories of the royal line. As AI dug deeper, the real motive behind the fire emerged. It wasn't random destruction. It was a calculated political act, orchestrated to keep power and knowledge away from the people. One document revealed the confession of a high-ranking official under Ptolemy VIII who had overseen the destruction. Our power depends on the ignorance of the people. These scrolls will make them ask questions we cannot answer. Burn them. Let only the truths we choose remain. Other documents revealed that the Library of Alexandria once held dangerous knowledge, scrolls on the true motion of the planets, discoveries that threatened to unravel the social order, and philosophies that challenged the divine authority of the ruling elite. A letter from the chief librarian, Ariston, written just before the fire, was reconstructed in haunting clarity. "I saw the first flames rise. They make no effort to hide. They say knowledge is the greatest threat, and for that it must burn. I write these lines hoping someone, someday, will learn the terrible truth." AI's discoveries didn't just uncover the political motivations, they revealed the heartbreak of those who tried to protect the knowledge. Many librarians and scholars risked their lives to hide precious scrolls, only to be hunted down and executed. One final document full of sorrow was written by an Alexandria scholar who witnessed the burning. The flames reached the heavens, the scrolls turned to ash. "We wept, not for the library, but for the future." They did not just burn paper, they burned the soul, the knowledge, the hope of humankind. Now, as the truth of Alexandria's fire is pulled from the shadows by AI, we see more clearly than ever the brutality of power and the cost of controlling information. This was not merely the loss of a library, it was a warning about the danger of absolute control over truth. The scrolls that turned to ash in Alexandria prove a painful truth. History is always written by the victors, and real knowledge is always seen as a threat to absolute power. In the writings revived by AI, the Library of Alexandria is no longer just a tragic ruin. It becomes a symbol of the cruelty of those who would burn the future to preserve their dominance. And from within the ashes, one final message still echoes from the lips of Alexandria's forgotten scholars. A desperate plea, a warning we must not ignore. Protect knowledge, for when it is gone, darkness will last forever. Beneath the scorching desert, in the cold shadows of Egypt's ancient tombs, lie secrets that humanity has never truly understood. Majestic pyramids, mysterious burial chambers, and stone-carved texts preserve the memories of a civilization obsessed with the afterlife and the relentless pursuit of immortality. But when artificial intelligence finally decoded the ancient inscriptions hidden deep within these tombs, what emerged was not just familiar mythology, but something far more terrifying, a brutal belief system about the true cost of eternal life. One of the first texts AI translated came from the tomb of a high priest under Pharaoh Seti I. It unveiled a chilling ritual once performed in absolute secrecy. For the pharaoh's soul to live forever, the blood of the living must merge with the mummified flesh. The heart of the living must be torn while still beating. That blood is the doorway through death. As AI delved deeper into Egypt's underground tombs, the horror only intensified. A series of inscriptions from the tomb of Pharaoh Ramses II described a recurring blood ritual involving living human sacrifices forced into death. Each year, on the night when the moon disappears, 20 living souls shall be offered. Their blood will cleanse the pharaoh's corpse, awakening his soul for eternity. The horror lay not only in the act, but in how society accepted these rituals as necessary, even sacred. AI-recovered texts revealed a disturbing reality. Victims were often slaves, prisoners, or innocent civilians kidnapped in the night, never to be seen again. One inscription uncovered in Queen Nefertari's tomb shocked the world. "They came in the night and took my son. I was forbidden to cry or search. It was said to be an honor, to offer our blood so the queen might live forever." The resurrected inscriptions from Egypt's tomb walls unveiled a chilling belief. Eternal life was not a gentle afterlife, but a state fueled by blood and spiritual energy from the living. AI uncovered even more terrifying lines in a hidden tomb near the Valley of the Kings. When Pharaoh dies, not only must blood be spilled, but the closest servants must be buried alive, so their souls may serve him forever in the next world. Other inscriptions echoed the agony of those forced to accompany the pharaoh in death, creating ghostly whispers that seemed to echo through the millennia. We were buried alive in endless darkness. Our souls are trapped for all time. Eternal life for Pharaoh is eternal hell for us. Before AI, these rites were viewed through the lens of cultural mythology. But now the chilling truth emerged. The ancient Egyptians believed immortality could only be achieved through pain, sacrifice, and death. As AI explored further, it revealed the chilling clarity of intent among Egypt's elite. Pharaohs, priests, and rulers knew exactly what they were doing. In one text, reconstructed from the tomb of a priest named Imhotep, the deception was made painfully clear. The people must never know the truth. We created the illusion that the afterlife is peace, but we know it is built from blood, suffering, and death. With AI's help, the world now understands the grim secrets buried beneath the golden pyramids and sacred tombs. What was once admired as a majestic civilization now appears in a colder light, a society that believed human life could be sacrificed to achieve immortal dreams. And when we stand before Egypt's pyramids today, perhaps the awe will be mixed with something colder, the haunting knowledge that thousands of souls still whisper from below. These ancient inscriptions are not just echoes from the past. They are warnings. Beneath every step in the tombs of kings and queens lies a question: how far are we willing to go to live forever? Immortality, once the dream of gods, became a nightmare built on the suffering of others. The ancient texts, revived by AI, offer not just history, but prophecy. A final message rises from the shadows, written by a forgotten voice of the past: protect the living. For in the pursuit of eternity we have buried our humanity. The sands of Egypt still hold their secrets, but now we are finally beginning to hear them. Over 4,000 years ago, along the banks of the Indus River, a brilliant civilization once flourished. The Harappan civilization, or the Indus Valley civilization, is regarded as one of humanity's earliest urban societies. It built grand cities with advanced architecture, drainage systems, and a thriving way of life that endured for centuries. But suddenly, around 1900 BCE, the civilization vanished, as if wiped from history overnight. What happened in those final days? For years, the question was answered only with vague theories: natural disasters, prolonged drought, or invasions. But when artificial intelligence finally deciphered the ancient Harappan script, texts once thought lost forever told a different story, one far more terrifying. Clay tablets, long dismissed as meaningless, now revealed a vivid portrait of a society collapsing under civil war and widespread plague. One tablet, translated by AI from the ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro, described the beginning of the end. This year's harvest did not come. The river has dried. The wells are empty. Families grow hungry. They blame one another. And now they begin to fight. Other recovered tablets painted an even darker picture. Once prosperous cities had become bloody battlefields. A tablet from Harappa reads, "Bodies lie across the streets. Those once brothers now turn on each other, fighting over the last drops of water and scraps of food." But civil war was not the only disaster. As violence consumed the cities, a deadly plague emerged. A recovered text from Dolavira recorded the outbreak. No one knows where the sickness began. Those infected burned with fever, their skin covered in sores. Death came swiftly. We tried to isolate them, but the disease spread too fast. Another tablet from Mohenjo-Daro described the aftermath. There are not enough of us left to bury the dead. Corpses were thrown into the river, but the river was dry. The sun scorched the bodies, and the sickness spread further. The gods have abandoned us. The AI reconstructed texts revealed a dual catastrophe, war and disease, crushing the Harappan world in a downward spiral of destruction. One of the most heartbreaking discoveries was a desperate plea from a Harappan ruler written to neighboring cities. "We have no living left to resist. The sickness kills faster than swords. Please come to help us, or tomorrow you will fall into the same darkness as we have." But that call for help was never answered. AI translated a following tablet, showing that the neighboring cities were also overwhelmed. "We sent messengers for aid. None returned. Perhaps there is no one left to help. Everyone is dying. All are fading into the dark." The once vibrant cities of Harappa fell silent. Empty streets, ruined homes, and no voices left to speak. In a final letter reconstructed by AI, a common citizen left a haunting message. "I write this so someone in the future may know how we lived or how we died. We were a great city, but we killed each other, and the plague devoured us. This is our end, and none remain to tell the story." Thanks to AI, the final days of the Harappan civilization are no longer a mystery. They did not vanish due to nature alone. They tore themselves apart through war and were finished by plague. The lesson of Harappa is not just a tragic tale of an ancient people. It is a warning. It speaks to what happens when a society falls into chaos, when fear turns people against each other, and when disease spreads faster than compassion. As we look upon our modern cities, we must ask ourselves, are we truly different? Or have we simply not faced what they did? The people of Harappa believed their cities would last forever. But they were wrong. Their civilization is gone, but their warning still echoes like a cold whisper from the distant past. Do not forget us. Do not repeat us. And if we do not listen, one day our cities may vanish just as theirs did. Babylon, a name that echoes like legend, was once the most magnificent and prosperous capital of the ancient world. Situated along the Euphrates River, it was a center of power, wealth, and culture. The famed hanging gardens, opulent palaces, and immense riches turned Babylon into the very image of glory and absolute dominion. But within that brilliance, a curse quietly grew, sowing the seeds of collapse. When artificial intelligence first deciphered the ancient cuneiform tablets from Babylon, a far darker truth began to emerge from behind the golden curtain. These old inscriptions, once thought harmless, became crystal-clear warnings about the consequences of pride and moral decay. One of the first tablets AI translated, found in the Temple of Marduk, Babylon's supreme god, opened the first gate into the darkness. Babylon is losing its soul. The kings have forgotten the gods. The rich exploit the poor. Morality is trampled underfoot. Judgment will come soon. As AI dug deeper, it uncovered terrifying prophecies written meticulously by Babylonian priests and seers. One tablet from the reign of King Belshazzar, who ruled during Babylon's final days, captured the scale of divine warning. The king drank from goblets stolen from sacred temples. He laughed at the hunger of the poor as homes rotted in depravity and incest. The gods shall abandon Babylon. Darkness will swallow the city. The next tablets revealed that these warnings were ignored. Babylon's elite continued to drown in decadence while the common people starved. One AI-recovered text exposed the deep social decay. The wealthy feast day and night, throwing food away, while children die in the streets. Pride has blinded them all. None listen to the voices of the gods anymore. Then, as foretold, catastrophe struck. One clay tablet from King Belshazzar's palace described the night Babylon fell to the Persian army under Cyrus the Great. The Babylonians were drunk in celebration. The city gates left open in arrogance. The enemy crept in like shadows. When the people awoke, the streets ran red with blood. Even more chilling were records left by surviving priests describing their helplessness as everything they had built crumbled before their eyes. We watched the city burn, the king fled in vain, palaces turned to fire. We remembered the prophecies and knew it was our pride that had destroyed Babylon. AI's translations made it clear the gods had not abandoned Babylon. The people had abandoned their gods with arrogance and corruption. One tablet from the Temple of Ishtar put it plainly. We were once the most beloved city of the gods, but we betrayed them. We chose power, gold, and pleasure over reverence. Now Babylon is a city of the dead. Even after its fall, a haunting curse was passed among Babylon's survivors, and AI unearthed the chilling words. Whoever rebuilds Babylon shall die in fire and blood. Whoever revives pride shall face ruin 100-fold. Babylon is the final lesson of human arrogance. Babylon's fall was not caused by natural disaster or foreign invasion alone. It was destroyed from within, by excess, by ego, and by the loss of moral compass. Thanks to AI, we now see Babylon's final days more clearly than ever. The ancient prophecies still whisper urgently to us today that no matter how strong or wealthy a society may become, the moment it abandons humility and virtue, its downfall is inevitable. The curse of Babylon is not just a tale of the past. It is a warning, a message etched in stone, now echoed through time. Pride is the first step toward destruction. Babylon is gone, but its curse and the consequences of arrogance still linger, haunting humanity with the most painful lesson history has ever offered. Before Rome rose to dominate the Italian peninsula, there existed a mysterious and powerful civilization, the Etruscans. From the 8th to the 3rd century BCE, the Etruscans built mighty cities, magnificent architectural works, and a wealthy culture filled with strange religious rituals, and yet they vanished suddenly, leaving behind little more than mysterious tombs and a bizarre writing system no one could decipher. To this day, the Etruscan language remains one of the greatest enigmas in history, but with the help of artificial intelligence, what were once incomprehensible texts are now beginning to reveal some of the most horrifying secrets history has ever concealed. From the very first text decoded by AI, archaeologists noticed something chilling. The Etruscans were no ordinary civilization. They were obsessed with death, power, and brutal rituals designed to preserve the authority of their noble class. One stone tablet discovered in an ancient tomb in the city of Tarquinia, when translated by AI, described a terrifying funeral ritual. When the king dies, his loyal servants are to be killed immediately. Their blood shall be poured over his corpse so their souls may continue to serve him in the world beyond. But that was only the beginning. Further AI translations uncovered even more gruesome funeral customs. In another tomb in Cerveteri, a text vividly detailed an unspeakable ritual. Those chosen to die with the deceased are brought next to the body. While their hearts still beat, the priest cuts out the living heart with a blade. The flowing hot blood awakens the soul of the dead. Each new translation unearthed darker truths. A small stone tablet found near Orvieto told of another terrifying practice. Prisoners of war and captured slaves live in constant fear, knowing they could be sacrificed at any moment to ensure a noble soul finds peace. Yet what's most disturbing isn't just the rituals themselves. It's how the Etruscans used them to instill fear and maintain control. One AI-translated text from the tomb of a king named Lars Porsena made it clear: "We maintain power not only through military might, but through fear in the hearts of our people. They must believe we control both their life and their death." Through these horrific sacrificial and funerary practices, the Etruscans built a society governed by absolute fear. Another inscription from a tomb in Volterra, decoded by AI, painted this image in sharp detail. "The people must live in fear always, for only fear ensures obedience. If not enough die in the rituals, we will take more from families who dare oppose us." Even more chilling, AI reconstructions revealed that Etruscan priests and nobles deliberately sustained a state of perpetual war, all to ensure a constant supply of human sacrifices. A decoded inscription from the tomb of a high priest in Veii exposed this dark strategy. "War must never cease, for it is the only way to provide enough prisoners for sacrifice. If peace comes, we lose the power of fear." As these texts surfaced, a question began to form in the minds of historians. Was it this obsession with fear and cruelty that ultimately doomed the Etruscans? Did they, in trying to dominate their people, sow the seeds of their own destruction? The final text, translated from a site in the city of Clusium, may hold the answer. It recounts what appears to be a massive revolt from the oppressed people. "We could no longer endure this fear. The people rose up, burned the temples, and slaughtered the priests who had spread horror for generations. We wanted to end the terror once and for all." It was not foreign invaders or natural disasters that brought down Etruscan civilization. It was the backlash of their own people, driven by years of dread, suffering, and bloodshed. The very fear they engineered to control others became their undoing. Today, when we stand before the quiet Etruscan tombs buried beneath the earth, we feel more than just awe at the beauty of a lost world. We feel the chill of a terrifying lesson. Power maintained through fear always leads to ruin. A society that replaces trust with terror is one that ultimately consumes itself. What the Etruscans left behind is more than just ruins and cryptic inscriptions. It's a warning carved into stone and echoing across millennia, a message that has survived longer than the civilization itself. Fear may be a powerful tool, but it is a fragile foundation. No matter how strong the rituals, how loyal the army, or how deep the graves, when fear replaces loyalty, collapse is inevitable. The Etruscans' greatest failure was not their cruelty, but their belief that it would last forever. They thought fear was eternal, but history showed otherwise. The people they oppressed learned to rise. The temples they built to dominate were turned to ash. And the nobles who once ruled by terror became nameless skeletons in the dark. The Etruscan voices, now revived by AI, do not speak of glory, they whisper of mistakes. They remind us, in a tone more somber than triumphant, that civilizations fall not only from outside, but from within. When fear becomes the law, rebellion becomes the answer. And so, as we listen to the ancient echoes translated by machines of today, we are left with one final, cold truth. The past is not silent, it warns. Lying silently on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, the Temple of Delphi was once the most renowned spiritual center of the ancient world. The ancient Greeks believed that here the prophecies delivered by the priestess Pythia were the very voice of Apollo himself, guiding the future and shaping the destinies of kings, generals, and ordinary people alike. But Delphi's fame was not solely built on the greatness of its prophecies. Behind the widely known predictions recorded in history lay other messages, far more terrifying, intentionally buried beneath the earth for thousands of years. And now, for the first time, these dark revelations have come to light thanks to the reconstructive and decoding powers of artificial intelligence. A small stone tablet decoded by AI from the deepest chamber beneath the Temple of Delphi revealed a message that once terrified the ancient priests so profoundly that they swore to hide it forever. When the sun rises in the west, when the sea swallows the cities, when mankind turns to slaughter driven by selfishness and endless greed, on that day the world shall begin its end. Archaeologists were stunned as AI reconstructed the full content of this haunting message, not only because of its apocalyptic tone, but also because of the Greeks' desperate effort to bury such prophecies, as if they feared the mere knowledge of them would cause them to come true. Another recovered inscription, translated from a stone within a hidden room of the temple, sent even more chills down the researchers' spines. Let no one know these things, for knowledge is sometimes the gateway to collapse. When mankind sees the darkness ahead, it will hasten its own destruction to meet it. These were not ordinary predictions. They carried a terrifying philosophy. The more humanity knows about its dark fate, the faster it moves to fulfill it. AI reconstruction of another stone from the temple's secret archive offered insight into why the ancient Greek priests chose to hide these grim messages. We chose to conceal this truth, not to deceive mankind, but because if they knew the darkness of their future, chaos would descend upon the world instantly. The best path is to let them live in hope and ignorance. One especially chilling recovered text described a specific future the priests feared would come to pass if humanity did not change. A time shall come when mankind commands powers far beyond the gods. They will build machines that think for them, but those very machines will become the spear that pierces the heart of humanity when humans give them control over the world's fate. This passage shook the scholarly world to its core, not just for its poetic doom, but because it so clearly referred to artificial intelligence, the very tool we are using right now to rediscover these long-lost warnings. The deeper the AI probed into these ancient inscriptions, the more clearly a terrifying truth emerged. The ancient Greeks may have understood something deeply unsettling, that humanity itself is its greatest enemy. Their efforts to bury these messages were not just a way to protect society from despair, but a final act of desperation in the face of a bitter truth they dared not speak aloud. One final text recovered from Delphi, vivid and personal, was a painful message from an elderly priest named Agathon, the last to document these hidden prophecies. I pray that one day someone wise enough will understand what I write today. Tell mankind this: power and ambition are a double-edged blade. They will lift you high and then cast you into the deepest abyss. Remember, the end does not come from nature or the gods. It comes from human greed and pride. Now that AI has unearthed these long-buried messages from Delphi, we don't just gain new insight into ancient Greek wisdom. We're left with a bone-chilling awareness of just how serious these warnings were. Delphi, once seen as a beacon of hope and divine guidance, turns out to have also been the keeper of the most horrifying predictions about the fate of humanity. The ancient Greeks hid these words, perhaps as a final attempt to avoid a future they believed was inevitable if mankind refused to change. But now the seal has been broken, and with it comes a question we can no longer avoid. Are we truly ready to listen and change, or will we continue down the same path, repeating the same mistakes despite every warning history has left behind. These prophecies were never meant to remain hidden forever. They waited for a moment when we might finally understand them. That moment may be now, or it may be slipping through our hands once again. The voices of Delphi still echo, not as relics of the past, but as urgent messages for the present. Their warnings are not wrapped in riddles. They are direct, deliberate, and deadly clear. When man creates what he cannot control, when knowledge becomes weaponized, when hope is replaced by arrogance, the collapse shall not come as a surprise. It will be the only possible outcome. These were not divine punishments foretold. They were consequences, logical, human, and terrifying in their certainty. Delphi did not speak of wrath from Olympus. It warned of something closer, more personal, and far more dangerous: ourselves. Mankind will build its doom, brick by brick, code by code. What Delphi feared most was not prophecy fulfilled, but prophecy accelerated by the very hands of those who heard it. Now, as we stand with these ancient words resurrected by machines we created, we are forced to choose. Do we heed the voices of the past, or do we silence them once more, choosing ignorance over change? The forgotten prophecies of Delphi are no longer forgotten. They are here, clear, terrifying, and uncomfortably close to reality. The question is no longer what the future holds. The question is whether we have the courage to change it. Perhaps no lost civilization has captivated and confounded humanity quite like Atlantis. Since the philosopher Plato first mentioned this mythical island in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, thousands of scholars, archaeologists, and dreamers have searched the oceans for traces of its existence. Yet all returned empty-handed, as if Atlantis had never existed at all, or worse, as if it had been deliberately erased from human memory. What's strange, however, is that traces of Atlantis don't only appear in Plato's writings. When artificial intelligence was trained to decode ancient texts from Egypt, Minoan Crete, Sumer, and even Etruria, it uncovered spine-chilling consistencies, each one referencing a great empire in the ocean, once endowed with immense power, only to fall in a catastrophic disaster. One ancient passage from the Temple of Sais in Egypt, reconstructed by AI from symbols nearly faded into dust, reads, "They ruled the waves. Gold, silver, and light covered their citadels. But when their hearts turned arrogant, and they stole the energy of the gods, the sea rose, and all was swallowed by silence." AI also uncovered a series of texts from the Minoan civilization, which shares deep ties with the Atlantis legend, describing a strange form of technology unheard of for that era. An ancient inscription from the island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, reads, "They held in their hands a light not born of the sun. They shaped stone and metal with their will. But that power was never meant for mankind. When they crossed the line, the earth shook, the skies roared, and the ocean claimed everything." This raises an unsettling question. What kind of energy could grant such immense power and be destructive enough to erase an entire civilization? Modern scholars long dismissed these accounts as metaphorical, but AI, by compiling ancient records across diverse cultures, reconstructed this idea with chilling clarity. In ancient Sumerian writings, there is mention of a force called the Black Fire, an abstract power used by the gods to create or destroy worlds. One clay tablet from the city of Eridu states, "The ones from the sea stole the black fire. They believed themselves equal to the gods, but the black fire never serves the arrogant heart." The shocking parallels between Egyptian, Minoan, and Sumerian texts suggest that Atlantis may not be a lone myth, but rather a collective memory, distorted, obscured, or perhaps intentionally forgotten. AI also reconstructed a passage carved into stone on the island of Malta, long believed to have been a transit point between Atlantis and ancient Europe. When the kingdom in the ocean fell into darkness, a column of water taller than the mountains swallowed everything. We ran, but the sea reclaimed blood and stone. Only memory and silence remained. Piece by piece, AI began painting a clearer picture. Atlantis was a civilization that had reached staggering heights in technology and power. But it crossed the boundaries of nature and morality. Pride, coupled with the misuse of a forbidden energy, possibly some primordial force or something modern humans still fail to comprehend, led to total annihilation. A haunting detail from an ancient text on Crete, brought back to life by AI, suggests that the people of Atlantis had been warned. The stars shifted their paths, the sky glowed in ways never seen before. It was the final sign, but they continued on, believing they could not fall. And when the disaster came, it wasn't a simple flood. According to descriptions in ancient texts analyzed by AI, it was a cascading chain of geological and climatic events, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, all occurring in swift succession, as if nature itself had come to collect a debt that should never have been borrowed. A final inscription found in a temple ruin in Egypt and translated by AI offers a cold and ancient warning. If mankind ever again finds the forbidden light, remember Atlantis. Not all light leads to life. Some lights lead straight into the abyss. The disappearance of Atlantis may not have been merely a myth, but the erasure of collective memory, a painful memory of what happens when humans believe they are gods. Today, as AI helps us stitch together the fragments of that forgotten past, the most terrifying realization is not that Atlantis once existed, but why it was erased from history. Someone, or something, made sure humanity would forget the catastrophe. As if that erasure itself was a final attempt to shield the future from repeating it. But the question now is, have we truly learned anything? Or are we racing toward a new version of Atlantis? One that won't sink beneath the sea but will collapse under the weight of our unchecked pride and boundless technology. The deeper AI digs, the more it reveals not just ruins or fables, but encoded memories from civilizations long gone, warnings etched in stone and clay, whispered in a forgotten tongue, warnings that tell us, do not awaken what was once sealed. The price of forbidden knowledge is never paid in gold, but in blood. In every instance, Atlantis is remembered not as a utopia, but as a fall, a warning, not a wonder. And maybe that is the greatest tragedy, that we misunderstood the story. We romanticized Atlantis, imagined it as a paradise lost, when in truth it was a punishment fulfilled, not from gods, not from the earth, but from ourselves. They believed they could conquer the forces that birthed them. They believed the sea could be tamed, the stars commanded. But in the end, the silence was their answer. Now, as the ancient voices return through machines of our own making, we stand at a crossroads eerily similar to theirs, with our own light not from the sun, with our own ambitions to surpass the gods, and with our own warnings already written. Not in clay or stone, but in data and code, the memory of Atlantis was erased, not because it was false, but because it was too true. The question is no longer whether Atlantis existed. The question is, are we becoming Atlantis again? When people speak of ancient China, they often envision a long-standing, brilliant civilization, grand city walls, radiant empires, dynasties spanning millennia, and a rich tapestry of philosophy. But behind this dazzling image lies a shadowed history, one marked by purges, genocides, and truths that have long remained untold. until artificial intelligence began deciphering the oracle bones and buried bamboo scrolls once thought lost to time. For centuries, the scripts carved into turtle shells and animal bones, known as oracle bone script, and the ancient bamboo slips were gateways into the Shang and Zhou dynasties. Yet most remained indecipherable due to their complex symbols and a nearly lost grammatical system. Now, thanks to AI's superior data processing, these fragments are beginning to speak. And what they reveal is not just history, but horror. One record decoded by AI from the Shang dynasty during King Wu Ding's reign, carved into a buffalo shoulder blade, shatters the myth of the benevolent Son of Heaven. Each month, 50 people are chosen for sacrifice. If the harvest fails, the number doubles. Those who disobey are burned alive at the city gate. More disturbing still, AI uncovered further inscriptions that not only emphasize sacrifice, but document systematic internal cleansing, carried out regularly within the palace and conquered regions. One oracle bone reads, "When whispers of rebellion arise, the entire family is executed. Women and children are buried alive with the patriarch to silence their spirits." These texts were never part of official chronicles. They were buried, labeled as insignificant or incomprehensible. But AI has connected them into a dark portrait of how the first dynasties maintained power through blood, fear, and absolute loyalty. During the Qin dynasty, ancient bamboo slips from the region of Xianyang reveal even darker truths. A text written just before Qin Shi Huang unified China was translated by AI as follows: "Those who reject legalism shall be buried alive. Books are burned, but the memory of scholars must also be erased. He who remembers the past is an enemy of the new empire." This is the earliest surviving account of the infamous burning of books and burying of scholars, one of the most controversial events in Chinese history. But AI found an even more horrifying detail on another bamboo slip. Not just scholars, anyone who taught, recorded old scripts, or refused to swear absolute loyalty shall be buried alive at the borders. Reconstructed documents reveal that over 4,000 people were executed in a single purification campaign lasting less than 3 months under the Qin. The version described in official history is merely the tip of an iceberg, one wrapped in a cloak of righteousness and morality. A bamboo record from the Western Han dynasty containing a confidential edict to border officials further exposed the true nature of the ruling apparatus. Anyone with blood ties to families who opposed the former dynasty must be erased from the registry. Their descendants may not hold office nor learn to read. If violated, execution without trial. It wasn't just about war and politics. Ancient texts reveal genocidal policies targeting minority ethnic groups, traced by AI to regions like Yunnan, Sichuan, and Guizhou. A bamboo slip found in Bashu recorded 300 people of the Man tribe were driven into a fire cave for refusing tribute. Survivors must change their surnames, learn the Han tongue, and bow to the emperor's statue each morning. Those who refuse, kill them. These discoveries reframed Chinese history, not just as a grand epic, but also as a long saga of political violence, forced assimilation, and cultural erasure, executed systematically across many dynasties. Most haunting of all was a bamboo slip buried with an exiled scholar from the Eastern Han era. It bore a bitter inscription: "I write the truth, but no one will read it. Those who knew are dead or waiting their turn." The court does not fear the people. It fears memory. Now, as AI revives these long-silenced memories, we begin to understand that the past was not forgotten by accident. It was erased on purpose. The ancient scripts, once dismissed as indecipherable symbols, now speak as quiet cries from the depths of history. from souls silenced, erased, and torn from collective memory. And perhaps the most terrifying part is not what AI has uncovered, but the silence that lasted for thousands of years before it. A silence in which humanity chose not to ask questions. For ages, the grand narrative of Chinese civilization glowed with glory. But beneath that light, buried in the very bones and scrolls that once told the story, was a record of brutality too dangerous to preserve and too haunting to ignore. These revelations do not tarnish Chinese history, they complete it. They tell the stories of those who were never meant to be remembered, those burned alive for their thoughts, erased for their heritage, silenced for their knowledge. They were not heroes in official books. They were threats to power. And yet, through AI's voice, they now speak. From shattered bone fragments and brittle bamboo strips, the forgotten now return. Their messages are not bitter. They are warnings. A civilization that fears memory will one day be forgotten. Truth buried is truth multiplied. The power structures feared memory more than rebellion. Because memory, once awakened, cannot be silenced again. As we listen to these ancient voices reawakened by machines of our own creation, we must ask, what else have we chosen to forget? And more importantly, what still remains buried, waiting to be heard? These are not merely historical records, they are unfinished conversations, and now, finally, we are listening. In the heart of ancient Anatolia, t.e. modern-day Turkey, the Hittites once forged an empire that rivaled Egypt and Babylon. They were warriors of iron, cunning diplomats, and among the first civilizations to master ironworking to expand their influence. At their peak, they controlled the northern Mesopotamian region and even clashed head-to-head with the pharaohs in the legendary battle of Kadesh. But as swiftly as the Hittites rose, they vanished just as suddenly and mysteriously. Within a few decades, around 1200 BCE, the entire Hittite imperial structure collapsed. Cities were abandoned, palaces burned, and an entire culture was nearly erased from memory. Only when AI began decoding ancient stone inscriptions written in Hittite, one of the oldest Indo-European languages, did the final chapters of their story emerge. And they were unlike anything recorded in traditional history. A stone tablet excavated near Hattusa, the Hittite capital, when translated by AI, offered a radically different beginning to the tale of their downfall. Power rotted from within. Princes conspired against one another. Oaths sworn before the gods were broken, and the southern winds brought a sickness with no name. This inscription pointed not only to internal fractures within the royal family, but also to a much greater threat, a plague, something rarely mentioned in official records. Other tablets found at Alakahöyük and Yazılikaya brought this image into sharper focus. AI uncovered a chilling description of how the disease spread, and even more disturbing, how it was used. The priest of the temple of Tahunna gave the order, place the infected dead into the enemy's water wells. They will die from within, and our warriors need not raise a spear. This may be one of the earliest surviving records of disease used as a biological weapon, not merely a natural disaster. The plague was weaponized, nurtured, transmitted and deployed by the Hittites to destroy their enemies. But in the end, they became trapped in the very web of destruction they had spun. A tablet from the temple of the goddess Ishtar in Arinna, restored by AI, documented the widespread terror during the empire's final days. There is no safe place left. The plague no longer knows friend or foe. Even those who cast spells now die like commoners. Blood flows from the eyes, and the soul leaves before the body hits the ground. The disease began at the borders, slowly creeping toward Hattusa. But instead of taking steps to contain it, the Hittite court fell into cycles of blame and political purging. A record from the royal archive, reassembled by AI, stated, "The priests declared it divine punishment, for the queen had violated the sacred rite. She was hanged before the altar. Yet the plague did not stop." This marked the beginning of a wave of royal executions, followed by assassinations, coups, and military infighting. One tablet described King Suppiluliuma II, the last king of the Hittites, murdering his own brother in a fit of paranoia. He claimed his brother carried the southern curse. But before the body had turned cold, the king himself began bleeding from his ears. It was the sign of death. These stone inscriptions decoded by AI revealed that the fall of the Hittites did not come from a singular enemy, not Egypt, nor the northern tribes, but from within, betrayal, plague, and moral collapse. One final inscription, hurriedly carved into the eastern wall of Hattusa's fortress, is believed to be the parting words of a surviving priest: "We use death to maintain power, but in the end, death came for us. May the gods forgive if they still remember the Hittites." Through the lens of AI, the fall of the Hittites is no longer a tale of noble fate or divine whim. It is a cold lesson in the dangers of ruthless power and the consequences of weaponizing nature itself. They did not fall in battle. They imploded under the weight of their own ambition, consumed by the very forces they believed they could control. And today, as we stand before the stone ruins of Hattusa, cracked, wind-worn, yet hauntingly majestic, we must see more than fading beauty. We must hear the whispers of a past that still warns us. A civilization that trades wisdom for arrogance is already doomed. The Hittites believed themselves invincible, unshakable by man or God, and yet they were defeated, not by war, but by their own hands. AI's discoveries shed new light on the Hittite legacy. They were not simply victims of time or fate, but of choices. Choices made in fear, in hunger for control, and in the illusion of divine immunity. They poisoned their enemies and themselves. They blamed their queen and their gods. They sacrificed their own and were sacrificed by history. What remains now are not just ruins, but records. Records that once lay dormant in stone, waiting for a voice to decode them. And AI has done just that. From fragments of tablets once too fractured to read, a voice has returned, a voice that says, "We were powerful, and we fell, not because we were weak, but because we forgot what power was meant to serve." As we continue to uncover the buried truths of ancient empires, the story of the Hittites stands as a mirror to our own time. A civilization that toys with nature, wages war with disease, and silences its own in the name of order, will eventually be undone, not by enemies, but by consequences. And the echoes of Hattusa remind us power is not eternal. But its mistakes, if unheeded, will be repeated. Hidden deep within the jungles of Cambodia, Angkor was once the heart of a glorious empire, where stone towers pierced through the dense canopy, and temples like Angkor Wat, Bayon, and Ta Prohm told stories of spiritual power and divine authority. But behind the grandeur and magnificence lies a chapter that has never been fully told. For centuries, the sudden collapse and disappearance of the Khmer Empire, once one of Southeast Asia's greatest civilizations, from its very center remained a mystery. But recently, ancient Khmer inscriptions once thought meaningless, weathered by time, have been decoded by artificial intelligence, opening a door into the darkness that history long chose to forget. One of the first texts AI reconstructed from Preah Khan Temple didn't contain hymns of peace or tales of conquest, but prayers soaked in blood. You are the God of birth and God of death. We offer you the firstborn son, so the rains may come on time, and the harvest may not wither. Such inscriptions were long dismissed by French-era scholars, deemed too obscure or too inconsistent with the image of a radiant religious civilization. But AI, through its ability to analyze and cross-reference millions of symbols, pieced together a complete picture. Human sacrifice was not a myth of the distant past, but a central part of ancient Khmer belief. From Phnom Penh to Bantier Chma, scattered inscriptions referenced a ritual known as Sbek Thmei, the renewal of the land's blood. This ceremony was performed during times of disaster or when the king believed the gods were angered. A text decoded by AI, buried beneath a headless statue of Vishnu, described the ritual in chilling detail. 4 children were chosen, none older than 8. They were bound and buried beneath the 4 corners of the new temple. Their blood soaked the ground so the spirit of the gods might dwell in peace. A horrifying question follows: how many of Angkor's great temples, how many sacred monuments were built upon lives sacrificed in silence? The rituals of blood were not the only truth AI uncovered. It also revealed an extreme form of political control built upon religious fear. One inscription on the western corridor of Angkor, Tom declared, "Those who do not believe in the power of the God King shall not be buried. They shall be thrown into the forest for the jungle demons to tear apart, so their souls may never find peace." A ruling system founded on supernatural fear functioned seamlessly for centuries. The king was not only ruler of the land, he was the embodiment of the divine, the bridge between heaven and earth. Doubting the king meant blaspheming the gods, and death came swiftly, followed by an eternal curse. One ancient record etched deep into the walls of Bantier Srey Temple linked Angkor's decline to one moment of mercy. When the king refused the sacrifice out of compassion, drought stretched across 3 seasons. The people rose in rebellion. The spirit of the gods left the city. Trees grew upon the rooftops. Blood dried on stone. Angkor has been silent since. AI compiled these fragments from dozens of temples across Angkor and proposed a shocking hypothesis. The fall of the Khmer Empire did not come from war, but from a rupture in collective belief. When extreme religion was challenged by human compassion, and when blood rituals were no longer upheld by royalty, the empire could not adapt and collapsed from within. One of the final inscriptions carved into a fallen pillar in the jungle near Beng Mialia bears the voice of a lone sculptor who survived the turmoil. "I carved the gods for 40 years, but today I carve my own name into stone, not to pray, but to say I once existed." Today, as the temple towers of Angkor rise through the jungle sunlight, visitors still marvel at their ancient beauty. But beneath every stone lie forgotten inscriptions, and every path carries the memory of souls never laid to rest. And AI, by reigniting light into these once dead characters, is forcing history to confront what it once buried. Could it be that the price of greatness was always blood? And if so, do we truly wish to know what else lies beneath those moss-covered stones? Angkor's silence is not just architectural decay. It is the echo of a broken contract between kings and gods, people and belief, a silence earned not by conquest, but by a civilization questioning the very rituals that once defined it. As AI pieces together the voices of the past, it becomes clear. The collapse of Angkor was not a fall from military defeat. It was a fall from certainty. Once the gods were no longer feared, Once rituals were questioned and abandoned, the foundation cracked. And with no myth strong enough to replace the old, everything dissolved, silently, slowly, and completely. The jungle did not conquer Angkor, doubt did, and when the gods were no longer fed, when blood no longer touched stone, the empire withered like a forgotten offering, devoured by vines and remembered only in echoes. The temples were never meant to be abandoned, but belief, once broken, leaves nothing to sustain them. AI has uncovered more than just forgotten scripts. It has revived a debate between faith and mercy, between power and sacrifice. Was it the king's compassion that doomed the city? Or was it the people's awakening, their refusal to kill for belief, that made the gods fall silent? The collapse of Angkor was not only political, it was spiritual, and it left behind towers without prayers, gods without worshippers, and temples whose stones now whisper only to the wind. Now, as the jungle exhales around these ancient stones, we are left with more than admiration. We are left with questions. If greatness demands blood, is it worth it? If gods demand innocence, are they gods at all? These were questions never asked aloud, until the silence of Angkor forced them upon us. And now, with AI's help, the dead speak again. Not to be worshipped, but to be remembered. Amid the deep blue of the Mediterranean, the island of Crete was once the heart of one of the most radiant and mysterious civilizations of the ancient world, the Minoans. Palaces like Knossos, with their winding corridors and surreal frescoes, have long sparked the imagination, evoking visions of a sophisticated, prosperous, and poetic society. But the truth hidden behind that splendor, now revealed through AI's decoding of the ancient Linear B script, is a tragic epic, soaked in blood and betrayal. Linear B, an ancient writing system inscribed on clay tablets, was the script of the Mycenaean Greeks, those who followed and, in many ways, ended the Minoan civilization. Until recently, scholars interpreted Linear B as simple records, grain inventories, wine distributions, and ritual offerings, administrative, dull, lifeless. But AI, with its ability to reconstruct language and match even distorted or faded symbols, uncovered a dramatically different reality. One clay tablet, shattered into fragments and found at Knossos, came alive under AI restoration. And its contents were haunting. 6th day after the full moon, 16 men, hands bound, brought to the grand hall. They were drowned in ceremonial wine, temple sealed for 7 days to repel spirits. This was no ledger. It was a narrative. A first-hand account, unrecorded in Greek history books, yet preserved in fired clay for over 3,000 years. AI continued to find more inscriptions from temple complexes and granaries. And what emerged shocked archaeologists. A record from the palace at Zakros reads, "Famine spreads. 3 villages rebelled, refused to send tribute. Commander ordered village elders burned alive as example. The crowd was silent. Violence did not come from invaders, it came from within, from rulers cloaked in ritual and faith." Simultaneously, AI uncovered evidence from other texts that pointed to rising tensions within the Minoan royal factions. A Linear B inscription from Phaistos described a chilling political betrayal. The Eastern Queen did not attend the great offering. Her troops did not withdraw from the valley as sworn. That night, 3 city gates were set ablaze. Knossos men said, "It is the will of the sea god," but we knew it was the will of the living. The bloodshed wasn't the wrath of nature or gods. It was ambition. It was power. The Minoans were not merely victims of the Santorini volcanic eruption, as long believed. The texts decoded by AI reveal that long before natural disaster struck, the seeds of civil strife were already smouldering like lava beneath stone. One final inscription, found in a ruined temple in Malaya and written in a decaying form of Linear B, reads like a farewell from a palace scribe. "We wrote in blood, but they only read in grain. Too late now, the palace is in flames, the strong take the throne, the gods turn their faces away." This was not a fall from heaven, it was a collapse from within. In time, the Greeks would call this land the realm of myth, the place of the Minotaur, the labyrinth, and King Minos, wise and regal. But it was myth that buried the truth, a truth of massacres, suppression, and betrayal. And now, as AI revives voices from baked clay and ash, we begin to see that behind every glorious civilization lie bodies buried by time, both literally and figuratively. Linear B, once seen as a dull tool of accounting, now reveals itself as a journal of atrocities. And AI has become the first to listen, patiently, in thousands of years. What we once thought were cold records of grain and wine were, in truth, encoded cries for help, silent witnesses to systemic cruelty. The temples of Crete, their columns and murals still standing, now appear less like shrines to the divine, and more like silent sentinels of buried pain. In their walls, under their floors, among their storerooms and sanctuaries, lived and died a people whose story was distorted by legend and forgotten by history. The myth of the labyrinth may have been more literal than symbolic. The corridors weren't just architectural, they were political. And the monster at the center wasn't a beast. It was ambition. This was not the wrath of gods, one fragment hints. It was the will of kings. Now, with each deciphered tablet, we are forced to reconsider. Was Minoan collapse the tale of a peaceful people swallowed by catastrophe, or the final act of an empire undone by its own hands? AI's revelations remind us that history often wears a mask. And only now, as we peel it away, do we begin to see the blood beneath the poetry. Along the sacred rivers that run through the Indian plains and beneath the towering Himalayas, ancient Indian civilization gave birth to a vast treasury of knowledge, not just philosophy and religious scriptures, but also Sanskrit texts that preserve something modern humans never expected to find: prophecies. Sanskrit, the sacred language of Hinduism and Buddhism, has long been revered as the vehicle of divine wisdom. Yet most ancient texts written in poetic and symbolic form were dismissed by modern scholars as too abstract, too metaphorical. Only when artificial intelligence stepped in, with its ability to analyze complex syntax, decode layered symbolism, and match context with historical culture, did the messages hidden beneath layers of philosophy begin to unfold. And what it uncovered wasn't praise of the gods, but something far colder, a warning for the future of humanity. One Sanskrit manuscript discovered in an ancient monastery near Kashmir, long believed to be a treatise on virtue, was reinterpreted by AI through semantic structure analysis. It revealed a chilling prophecy. When men reject the waters of sacred rivers, when gold holds more worth than grain, and when speech surpasses action, the age of darkness shall begin. AI confirmed that this text dates back to at least the 5th century BCE, aligning precisely with the description of Kali Yuga, the final age in Hindu cosmology's cyclical universe. But what truly unsettled researchers were the specific predictions that followed. A previously unreadable section of the original Mahabharata, reconstructed by AI from faded lines and worn-out glyphs, contained this striking passage: "Man shall fly in vessels of metal, but the earth shall offer no clean air to breathe. Cities will glow like the midday sun, yet hearts will darken beyond moonless nights. This is the sign of the end. From a modern lens, it's impossible not to think of aircraft, polluted urban skylines, and moral decay. No one can claim the ancients foresaw the future. But just as clearly, they left behind words that feel like unmistakable echoes of our own time. AI also decoded a Sanskrit inscription carved into the rock walls of Badami. It spoke of social decay in eerie detail. When the elderly are not honored, when priests trade words for silver, and when the trees weep from being untouched at their roots, then calamity finds its path. Another section foretells the rise of a false king during an age of unrest. He shall not be of noble line, he shall not learn the words of the elders, yet his speech shall move millions, and rivers of blood shall flow beneath his banner as the Ganges in monsoon. These lines sent shockwaves through the academic world. According to AI, the text wasn't describing a past, but warning of a future where leadership is born from mass panic, not wisdom or virtue. Going further, AI decoded a forgotten script from Tamil Nadu, written in an old hybrid Sanskrit dialect previously considered indecipherable. The content revealed a philosophical tragedy unfolding from within. When man burns forests to feed animals but forgets to feed his kind, when he digs for light beneath the dark earth, the soil shall become his grave. It reads less like a scripture and more like a will, left for generations who had not yet been born. And now, as AI brings these words back to life, we're left with an uncomfortable truth. The ancients were not ignorant. They simply spoke in ways we were too impatient to understand. Perhaps the most shocking discovery was a single line carved so faintly on a dried palm leaf from a collapsed Buddhist monastery that it had long gone unnoticed. AI enhanced the etching and revealed this final warning: if what I write is never read, the age of ruin shall arrive on time, but if read too late, none shall remain to read it. Sanskrit, once called the voice of the cosmos, now emerges not just as a vessel of sacred knowledge, but as a mirror reflecting modern humanity's arrogance, greed, and illusion of control. What we once saw as mysticism now reads as diagnosis. And the diagnosis is not good. In an age where we believe we have surpassed the ancients in logic, in science, in reach, they may have outpaced us in clarity of insight. They warned of pollution, of corrupted leadership, of moral decline, of forgetting the sacred in favor of the artificial. We ignored them, not because they were wrong, but because they didn't speak in our language. Now, AI has given them that language. Through AI, the sages of old, once quiet, once sealed in forgotten temples, are speaking again. Not to predict, but to warn, not with fear, but with clarity. The path is known, one passage concludes, it only awaits footsteps. And those footsteps, perhaps, are ours. These texts were not just myths, they were maps. And now, as we stand at the edge of a cliff, we must ask, are we following the path they marked? Or are we running from it only to arrive too late? The age of decline was never about time. It was about blindness, and AI, like an emotionless sage, has done its duty, to read what was once buried and remind the living what they chose to forget. From the stone walls of Jerusalem to the parched caves surrounding the Dead Sea, the history of Judaism has carved its legacy across millennia, not only in religion, but at the very heart of Western civilization. And yet, among the revered scrolls of the Holy Scriptures, there exists a darker chapter of Jewish history, one that has been forbidden, concealed, and buried in silence. These ancient Hebrew texts, some in their original language and others in archaic Aramaic dialects, are more than just divine commandments. They are shadowy records of a people marked by exile, persecution, and resistance. Through the lens of AI analyzing brittle parchments, inscriptions etched in stone, and the fragile fragments from the Qumran library, a long-forgotten voice begins to speak. One humanity may have chosen to ignore. One of the most disturbing discoveries comes from a forbidden manuscript, long banned in traditional rites. Known as the Sefer HaNistar, the Book of Hidden Things, this document, according to ancient rabbis, was to be read only by those who had undergone 3 years of ritual purification. Its contents, they warned, could drive the unprepared mind to madness. AI not only translated the text, but reconstructed damaged portions, piecing together charred fragments and disconnected lines. What emerged was a chilling account of arcane rituals, ceremonies where humans were not sacrificed to gods, but to nameless entities. The blood of the firstborn in the bloodline shall open the gate. The first son-born shall carry the curse until the final drop is spilled. No one must speak the true name of that soul, for to do so is death. Passages like these were once torn out, burned, or locked away in hidden chambers beneath ancient synagogues. But now over 70% of the content has been restored, and scholars fiercely debate whether these are mythic allegories or records of actual ancient rites lost to history. Inscriptions discovered on limestone at Masada, once the last fortress of Jewish rebels against the Roman Empire, reveal another layer of unsettling mystery. These texts are written in a hybrid of Hebrew and ancient Akkadian, forming what appear to be spells or incantations. One such inscription warns, "Whoever reads these words without the blood of Levi in their veins shall be blinded in the mind. The memories of the ancestors will enter their dreams and turn them into fire." Another line, perhaps more ominous, was carved into a sealed stone door, untouched for over 2,000 years. Do not open. Do not call, do not record, for that which is sealed in the name of Yahweh is not for the one who seeks understanding, but for the one who kneels. AI determined that these phrases are far more than religious metaphor. They bear the hallmarks of intergenerational curses, rituals designed either to protect or annihilate entire bloodlines, depending on who held the knowledge. What puzzled historians even more was the unexpected overlap between these ancient Hebrew rituals and long-lost traditions of other cultures, including the Phoenicians and the Hittites. It appears that during the chaotic centuries in the Levant, there may have existed a secret alliance among the priests of various civilizations, where knowledge of gods, curses, and ceremonies was shared behind closed doors. This theory gained traction with the AI-assisted decoding of a nearly forgotten manuscript, the Megillat Hashichicha, or Scroll of Forgetting. Unusually, it was engraved on metal rather than parchment, suggesting deliberate efforts to preserve or obscure its contents across generations. The scroll tells of a group of high priests who chose to seal off all memory of the ancient rites. By voluntarily embracing death without passing on the knowledge, the time for silence has come. This knowledge is not for the world that follows. If it returns, we cannot save them again. These words are not warnings in the poetic sense, they are final declarations. The scribes weren't simply hiding dangerous ideas. They believed that the very existence of this knowledge posed a threat to future generations. What AI has unearthed is not merely a set of translations. It is a confrontation with human boundaries, the line between preservation and oblivion, between curiosity and consequence. As the layers of language, ash, and secrecy fall away, the forbidden texts reveal something deeper. that not all words were meant to be read. Some prayers were crafted not to be spoken, but to be entombed. Some inscriptions were made not for remembrance, but for erasure by time itself. And yet the power of AI, with its unmatched memory and emotionless decoding, now challenges that ancient silence. It brings light to the forgotten, sound to the mute, clarity to the deliberately obscured. But in doing so, it poses a terrifying question. If these texts were meant never to return, who are we to break that pact? If the past whispers, not to be heard, but to test whether we dare listen, then what happens when we finally do? Perhaps the horror does not lie in the rituals themselves, but in what they represent. The limits of human understanding, the price of forbidden knowledge, and the echo of decisions made by those who once feared what we now seek to uncover. The AI cannot be cursed, cannot feel madness. But we can. To hear what was never meant to be heard is to step into a role our ancestors refused to take. And they may have had good reason. In the end, these ancient Hebrew texts remind us not all things buried are meant to be dug up. Not every secret is a mystery waiting to be solved. Some are warnings, some are traps. And if we, driven by the brilliance of machines and the hunger of human curiosity, unlock a gate that was never meant to open, we must be ready to ask, are we still the masters of our past, or have we just awakened something that remembered us all along? On the misty plains of Salisbury, the massive stones of Stonehenge stand like silent sentinels of time. For more than 5,000 years, countless theories have emerged: an ancient observatory, a druid ceremonial site, a cosmic gateway. Yet amid the swirl of speculation, one detail has been nearly forgotten. Faint carvings etched beneath the monoliths and on petrified charred wood near the circle. Only when modern AI began scanning and reconstructing thousands of fine marks, scratches once dismissed as the wear of time, did a chilling discovery emerge. The symbols weren't meaningless. They were a language, and that language carried a message never before revealed. A research team at the University of Cambridge used AI to reconstruct inscriptions on Pillar S49. What they uncovered was a repeated sequence of symbols with grammatical structure, something never previously recognized from the Neolithic era. AI cross-referenced these signs with symbol systems from other megalithic cultures, including Karnak in France and Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, and began reconstructing a Proto-Sanskrit language. The first translated lines stunned archaeologists into silence. The 13th night of the blood moon. First blood touches the ground. The wind ceases. The stones begin to speak. What had long been interpreted as a site of celestial worship now appeared to be the location of sacrificial rites. AI continued decoding deeply buried symbols near Stonehenge's central sacred pit, uncovering repeated depictions of bound human figures, arms outstretched as if in sacrifice, alongside glyphs representing fire, stone, spirit, and one enigmatic symbol AI labeled the Transformation Gate. A line of characters carved into a piece of fossilized wood near the outer ring suggested that Stonehenge may have served as a gathering point for ancient tribes to conduct sacrificial rites tied to the solar and lunar cycles. Every 32 seasons, the first is chosen, the one of pure blood, born on the day of the red sky. He shall be the offering, so the sun does not fall from the sky. Records indicated that those selected for sacrifice weren't prisoners or slaves, but highly respected individuals, such as priests or specially raised youths destined for this purpose. This helped explain why archaeologists had previously found skeletal remains near the monument's center, showing no signs of battle, yet bearing marks of chisel wounds on skulls, broken necks and partial burn scars. AI also reconstructed a particularly haunting inscription from the largest trilithon stone, nearly erased by erosion but partially preserved through fragments that had broken off over time. After over 3,000 simulations and comparisons, AI delivered a chilling translation. "This stone shall stand when blood flows the right way. If the blood stops, the stone will fall. And when the stone falls, the wind will weep. The sky shall reclaim the tongue of the earth." This phrase suggests that the ancients did not view these stones as lifeless objects. To them, Stonehenge was a living being, nourished by ritual, by blood, and by a belief in the cosmic balance between humanity and the universe. AI's findings are now overturning what the world thought it knew about Stonehenge. Rather than a memorial or a neutral site for astronomical observation, it may have been the center of a blood-soaked belief system, one in which sacrifice was the currency to maintain cosmic order. The stone circles were not merely physical structures, they were ritual machines operating under invisible laws known only to ancient priests. And with AI resurrecting a language once thought lost, the question becomes, are we truly ready to face the truths buried beneath these moss-covered stones for thousands of years? Stonehenge has always drawn awe, for its size, its precision, its mystery. But that mystery now deepens into something more unsettling. These newly decoded inscriptions hint at a worldview far darker than previously imagined. The ancient builders may have believed their survival, perhaps even the survival of the earth itself, depended on ritual blood and a strict cosmic contract. AI's reconstruction of forgotten language systems, paired with satellite imaging and ground-penetrating scans, revealed that Stonehenge's design wasn't only symbolic. It may have been functional. A calendar, yes, but also a vessel for transformation. A place where the physical and the spiritual crossed paths through acts not of worship, but of exchange. Evidence suggests that the site was aligned not only to the solstices but to more obscure lunar events like the blood moon, a time believed by many ancient cultures to mark the thinning of the boundary between worlds. The carvings consistently pair such events with depictions of bound figures and symbols of gateways or portals, always framed by fire and stone. Some scholars have begun to reconsider whether Stonehenge's original purpose was misunderstood, not because we lacked the science, but because we feared what it might actually reveal. The notion of living stone might sound poetic or even absurd, but the ancients may have seen energy and spirit embedded in all things. AI found repeated references to awakening the rock or feeding the silence, metaphors for activating some cosmic resonance through human life. When blood flowed in the right patterns, the stones were believed to respond, to vibrate, to speak. These weren't metaphors to them, this was reality, a worldview in which human life, cosmic balance and elemental forces were woven together by rites passed down in secret. As we peered deeper into these mysteries, a new dilemma emerges. For centuries, we've celebrated Stonehenge as a monument of human ingenuity, but what if it was something more, something that demanded a price? If we're only now beginning to understand the language of these rituals, do we risk awakening something else, not just knowledge, but power? Because in the view of its creators, Stonehenge wasn't built to remember the past. It was built to control the future, one ritual at a time. And now, with the return of its language, decoded not by priests or prophets, but by cold, calculating machines, we find ourselves standing at the threshold once more. Are we scholars or trespassers? Is the truth meant to enlighten us, or to test whether we deserve it? And as we listen to the voices long bound in stone, we must ask, Are these just echoes of a dead past? Or have we, without knowing, begun to hear the whispers of spirits still waiting in the dark? From the frozen lands of Scandinavia, the Vikings once spread terror across Europe, with their red dragon sails, war axes, and thunderous battle cries echoing over the night sea. But behind that heroic facade lay a world of mystery, where rune symbols were not merely used to write names or carve gravestones. They were a language of blood, of curses, and of life after death. Only when AI was employed to decode thousands of rune inscriptions etched into ancient stones, animal bones, and even human remains, did a brutal and long-hidden truth begin to emerge. Runes were not just writing. They were ritual tools, each stroke containing a fragment of the soul of the writer, or of the one about to be sacrificed. Researchers in Uppsala and Reykjavik, using AI to cross-analyze more than 3,000 ancient rune carvings, noticed disturbing patterns. Certain symbols that didn't exist in the standardized Elder Futhark alphabet kept appearing, often at burial sites where bodies had been interred without proper rites. AI suggested these were not letters, but magical glyphs used in sacrificial rituals for war gods like Odin or Freya. One massive stone in Uppland, Sweden, once translated as a memorial for a fallen chieftain, held 12 lines of runes. But when AI reconstructed the text using ancient grammatical rules, a true curse was revealed. Who betrays the blood of his clan shall be flayed under the moonlight. His blood shall redraw the gate for the wolf god. Whoever breaks this oath, his house shall fall for 3 generations. This was no eulogy, it was a warning, passed down in blood and stone like a living seal that time could not erase. Runes found at an ancient sacrificial site on the island of Gotland told of even more chilling practices, rituals where warriors were required to offer the blood of their loved ones. One oak carving, miraculously preserved through natural freezing, read, "The warrior must cut blood from the one he loves most to prove his courage to Odin. If he weeps, Valhalla shall shut its gates to him forever." AI matched such texts with archaeological evidence of broken bones, drilled skulls, and charred tissue at known warrior ritual sites. The brutality wasn't random, it was a philosophy. And the runes were the language that carried this brutality forward, spreading and sanctifying it as a sacred part of Viking culture. Another inscription, discovered near a ceremonial ship burial in Norway, described what was called the blood warrior rite. Blood of 7 beasts a traitor, and one of shared blood shall soak the soil. He who steps through without trembling shall burn with soul fire in battle. AI believes this was a real ritual. It would explain why some Viking cemeteries buried humans and animals together, sometimes bound or with limbs severed. These weren't meaningless acts of savagery. They were rites encoded in runes, performed in exchange for the right to die in battle and be reborn in Valhalla. Perhaps the most chilling discovery in AI's translation work was a series of runes long considered unreadable. These weren't random, they were hidden forms, only activated when arranged in spiral formations on stone circles or ceremonial mirrors. Once reordered, they revealed a singular, haunting message. We do not write to be read, we write to be remembered. And those who remember us will see blood seep through stone. In the Viking worldview, stone was more than a medium. It was a vessel of souls, of vows, and of wrath. Runes were not meant to be decoded casually. They were etched with purpose, often as acts of magic, or as warnings to those who dared disturb the past. AI, with its unblinking algorithms and limitless memory, has merely lifted the veil. What it revealed, however, is not simply history, but a darkness that once breathed, roared, and demanded sacrifice. This new understanding redefines what runes truly meant. They were not passive records, but active invocations. With every carved symbol, the Vikings weren't just communicating, they were channeling. They believed that through precise symbols, one could influence fate, curse enemies, summon protection, or even bind souls across realms. To carve a rune was to bleed belief into stone, and when those stones were placed around burial mounds, ship graves, or ritual grounds, they did more than mark territory. They sealed covenants between the living, the dead, and the gods. Many of the sites where these bloody inscriptions were found had long been dismissed as regional oddities, places where strange violence occurred or where animal and human remains were oddly arranged. But AI has shown that these arrangements follow patterns. Geometries matched with rune spirals, always centered around themes of death, transformation, and glory in battle. In some cases, the very positioning of bodies mimicked rune shapes, suggesting the deceased were laid to rest within a glyph itself, their remains becoming part of the spell. What modern people may call barbarism, the Vikings saw as sacred exchange. Pain was proof of worth. Death in battle was not the end, it was passage, and to be forgotten was the true curse. Thus, rune stones were not memorials, they were oaths, binding the soul to memory and the bloodline to fate. Some stones even bore symbols of erasure, signs meant to suppress the dead who had failed their clan or broken sacred codes. Those runes, AI warns, weren't written to be read, but to silence forever. Now, as AI revives what was once lost, rearranging runes, resurrecting languages, revealing blood-soaked philosophies, we stand at a new threshold, not just one of knowledge, but of responsibility. Because to read the old runes is not only to learn their meaning, it is to echo their power, to awaken echoes that were meant to sleep. And if blood truly soaks stone, if memory lives in symbol, then the Viking dead are not silent. They are waiting. Hidden among the blazing red cliffs of the Jordanian desert, the city of Petra, the legendary jewel of the ancient world, has long captivated humanity with its wild beauty and haunting mystery. Temples carved straight into mountain walls, narrow winding paths through stone canyons, and above all, the utter silence that now hangs over what was once a bustling city, all raise one haunting question. What truly happened to Petra? For centuries, scholars could only speculate about the fall of the Nabateans, the people who built Petra into a glittering trade empire. But everything changed when AI began decoding the ancient Nabatean language carved into stones, temple walls, and broken pottery fragments buried beneath red sands. As these rigid symbols came back to life through artificial intelligence, a very different picture emerged. Petra didn't fall because of natural disasters or Roman conquest. It collapsed under blood, betrayal, and conspiracy from within its own heart. AI revealed that Nabatean inscriptions weren't limited to names or trade notes. Many included encoded passages hidden in poetic structure or repeated phrasing. One inscription beneath Al-Khazneh, long thought to be a royal temple, was decrypted as, "When silver buys loyalty, stone no longer protects." The one who opened the gate that night did not come from outside, but bore our own blood. This line aligned eerily with old Arab folklore, claiming Petra was betrayed from within when a tribal elder, driven by personal gain, led invaders or rebels into the city. But this marked the first time such a claim was supported by the words of the Nabateans themselves. Another passage, carved around the central water cistern, the city's lifeline in the desert, carried a cryptic warning: "He who poisons the source shall be buried beneath it, but if the city drinks, then punishment shall fall upon both blood and stone." AI suggested Petra may have suffered a large-scale internal purge, where rival factions, hungry for power, resorted to poisoning and even live sacrifices to claim dominance. A separate inscription, crudely carved and non-standard in language, was believed by AI to be the writing of a prisoner or exile. It read, "I saw them bring a man to the stone platform." 4 dressed in black chanted ancient words. "They did not look at me, as if their eyes had been given to the gods. I don't know who will survive the night." What chilled archaeologists even more was a collection of symbols found at the site of Petra's ancient council chamber, where tribal elders once gathered to decide the city's fate. When the symbols were arranged in chronological order, as AI proposed, they formed what appeared to be a historical sequence, ending with the line, "No more oaths, no more faith, only power and shadow." Petra did not die. It killed itself. From this, AI pieced together a terrifying conclusion. Petra didn't fall to external invasion. It was undone by greed, betrayal, and moral decay from within. A civilization that once controlled the vital spice routes between East and West, richer than neighboring kingdoms, was not destroyed by an enemy's sword, but by its own hand, turning inward. The Nabateans, masters of commerce, architecture, and diplomacy, left behind no great record of conquest or collapse. What remained was silence, and now perhaps a whisper in stone. Today, tourists stand before Petra's majestic stone facades in awe of its beauty. But thanks to AI, we now know that behind that beauty lies a colder message, a warning carved in dust and rock. Every glory has its price, and no kingdom is beyond ruin if its heart has already begun to rot. AI's deciphering of the Nabatean language didn't just translate words. It uncovered voices. Voices that had been buried for nearly 2 millennia. They spoke not of conquests or construction, but of betrayal, of sacred codes broken in the pursuit of power, of sacrifices not to gods but to ambition. The poetic disguises, the loops of repetition, the coded curses, they weren't artistic flair, they were veils, and Petra's elders had used them to hide truth within beauty, trusting that only the worthy would ever understand what really happened. Even the positioning of certain inscriptions appears to carry meaning. The warning about water poisoning wasn't placed randomly. It surrounded the very well that sustained life in Petra. The message beneath Al-Khazneh was chiseled at the foundation, unseen by most, as if the builders expected it to last beyond the fall of their own temple. These were not notes for their time. They were warnings for the future, for us. The final decoded lines are perhaps the most devastating. Petra did not die, killed itself. This isn't just history, it's an accusation. A civilization so grand, so strategically placed and technologically advanced, was not undone by enemies. It collapsed when its own leaders placed wealth above loyalty, power above faith, and fear above justice. That's not just a story of Petra. It's a mirror. As Petra's shadows fall long across the desert floor, they now carry more than mystery. They carry memory. A memory that speaks louder through the silence AI has cracked open. A voice that says, even the greatest wonders fall when rot begins from within. And so Petra stands not only as a marvel of stone, but as a monument to self-destruction. A whispered lesson for every empire, every nation, every heart that dares believe it is untouchable. Nestled in the heart of the Mediterranean, the island of Crete was once home to one of Europe's most brilliant and enigmatic prehistoric civilizations, the Minoans. With grand palaces like Knossos, vibrant frescoes, and intricate water systems, the Minoans have long been celebrated as a peaceful, art-loving society of the sea. But that is only half the truth. Thanks to AI, we are now able to uncover the other half, the part history deliberately ignored: small, fractured clay tablets written in an ancient script known as Linear A. Long undeciphered, these symbols have now begun to speak. And what AI discovered wasn't lists of grain or mundane records. It found something far darker: chilling accounts of blood, violence, and collapse, hidden in code as if the Minoans themselves feared that someone might one day read them. One clay tablet discovered near Knossos, long thought to be a tax record, was restructured by AI using thousands of Linear A samples gathered from different sites. After removing noise and aligning linguistic patterns, a message emerged. On the third day after the quake, the market people came to the grain vault. They no longer feared the gods. The palace gates were broken, blood spilled on the white stone steps. Gone was the peaceful image of a radiant seaport or artistic palace. In its place stood a vision of chaos, a crumbling social order where the people, perhaps driven by hunger, rage, or disillusionment, turned against the very elite who ruled them. AI also uncovered recurring symbols describing what it interpreted as a ritual of atonement following social unrest. On a charred clay fragment from the deep layers of the palace at Phaistos, AI deciphered 13, 3 men, 7 women, and 1 child were offered in the night. They were chosen for bearing the guilt of the community. After their blood, the fire will rest. This line suggests the Minoans practiced collective human sacrifice, a detail never before confirmed. Archaeologists had previously noted vague evidence of individual offerings, but if this inscription is genuine, then Crete once saw blood-drenched nights in the name of divine balance. One particularly shocking discovery came from a coded tablet found in a temple near Mount Ioctus, considered the holiest site in Minoan religion. AI revealed the following passage, etched in concealed symbols. The god does not answer. The offerings are not enough. The grain dies in the fields. The gatekeeper sets himself aflame. The people of the sea shall come from the west. The city gate shall not stand through the storm season. The message read like a final confession, perhaps from a high priest, during a time of total collapse. It hinted at disaster, not just from within, but from an external threat as well, possibly the invading Mycenaeans or even remnants of the mysterious sea peoples who ravaged the eastern Mediterranean. The truly unsettling detail? Linear A, already a cryptic script, contained deeper layers of encryption. Some texts used spiral symbol arrangements, while others repeated words in reverse to obscure the true meaning. AI found that these irregular patterns were not just for secrecy, but may have been part of ritual writing, a sacred act meant to seal the soul of the writer and the event itself, as though writing was an integral part of the ceremony. Each time AI broke the spell of a new tablet, the true face of Minoan civilization became clearer, not just magnificent, but deeply conflicted, a world where faith, power, and crisis churned together like dark undercurrents beneath a calm sea. The vibrant images on palace walls, dolphins, priestesses, and flowers may have been masks hiding the despair of famine, rebellion, and blood spilled on sacred stone. Crete, once seen as a paradise of peace and beauty, may in fact have been a society grappling with catastrophe. Earthquakes shook its foundations, but it was fear, power, and a desperate search for divine favor that truly tore it apart. The coded prayers, the offerings in darkness, the cries of the forgotten, all whispered from crumbling clay as I gave them voice once more. One fragment from a now-ruined chamber even hinted that the Minoans themselves foresaw their downfall. The tablet read, "The gods hear nothing. The winds are not ours. If we write it, let the words sink beneath stone and not rise again." It was less a statement and more a plea, a desire to bury their story forever, to keep their shame from ever resurfacing. And yet time and technology have conspired to do the opposite. Compared to Petra, which fell by betrayal, Crete may have died within its own faith, a faith pushed to its limits, a civilization that once ruled the seas of the Bronze Age, undone not just by enemy swords, but by the invisible fractures inside its soul. And now, thanks to machines that never forget, their forgotten cries return. So as we walk among the ruins of Knossos or gaze at museum relics from Crete, we must remember these are not just echoes of the past. They are testaments to a world that tried to hide its fall in riddles. And perhaps the true tragedy of the Minoans is not that they vanished, but that they wrote their end, buried it in code, and still failed to escape the judgment of time. In the high valleys of central Mexico, the ruins of the Aztec Empire remain like footprints of a once glorious, yet deeply blood-stained civilization. The Templo Maya pyramid, statues of the war god Huitzilopochtli, and intricate carvings have told part of the story. But the rest, the most terrifying part, lies deeper in ancient texts written in the pictographic Nahuatl script, many of which were burned, buried, or intentionally ignored. Only when AI began decoding hundreds of forgotten codex copies and reconstructing torn manuscripts from the 16th century did a horrifying truth come to light. The sacrificial rituals were not myth. They were systematic, detailed, and recorded like machinery built on faith and power. One document recovered by AI from the Codex Chimalpopoca, once dismissed as pure mythology, revealed a vivid description of the Tlacaxipehualistli festival, a yearly ritual meant to wear the skin of man and resurrect the war god. Older translations blurred key phrases, misinterpreting them as dance of flowers or ritual celebration. But AI, after reanalyzing the surrounding context and symbolic imagery, offered this chilling retranslation. 4,000 hearts were raised. Blood streamed down the temple steps like red rivers. Each scream was a plea for rain. Those who could not witness it were deemed unworthy to live. There was no poetry in this. It described mass human sacrifice in horrifying detail. And more disturbingly, it showed how ordinary citizens were forced to watch, a form of collective psychological control through sacred terror. Another text, once buried deep in a Spanish library and now restored through hyperspectral imaging, revealed exactly how the Aztecs chose their sacrificial victims. Not just anyone was offered. The chosen were raised and prepared from birth as bearers of living souls. A boy of 12, bearing the god's name, was fed only pure foods. Each night, a keeper guarded his dreams in the temple. On the day the light changed color, he ascended the steps, smiling through tears. They cut out his heart when the sun stood at its highest, so the god would not grow angry. These children were not slaves, they were trained for death. Their sacrifice was an honor, a sacred destiny. And that made the ritual colder than simple killing. It rationalized death as divine purpose. What has long puzzled me, and at times embarrassed, Western scholars is this: why did the Aztecs so meticulously record such horrific practices? AI answered coldly, yet accurately, because the Aztecs did not view it as horrific. It was the center of their worldview. Death was not the end, but the cost of universal balance. Without blood, the sun would not rise. Without hearts, the gods would abandon them. This worldview explains why many later scholars, especially in the 20th century, rewrote Aztec texts with a gentler tone, softening, erasing, or ignoring the bloody details in an effort to protect the dignity of a noble culture. But AI doesn't romanticize, it reveals. A haunting passage recovered from the edge of a charred codex includes a line scholars had long avoided speaking aloud. When the Pale Ones came, they asked why the blood flowed so freely. I said, "So the sun may rise," they did not understand. Then they beheaded me, so their sun could rise. It's the direct voice of an Aztec, perhaps a priest, recorded by an indigenous scribe who had learned Latin after colonization. The quote captures the violent clash between two worlds, one offering blood to gods, the other invoking Christ as they conquered. Now that AI has brushed away centuries of ash and academic whitewash, we are forced to confront a starker reality than ever before. The Aztecs built their empire on absolute reverence for blood, not out of barbarity, but because they believed it was sacred logic. Their rituals were not madness, they were law, cosmic law, a contract written in flesh. To them, each heart was a prayer, each scream was a hymn, sacrifice was not cruelty, it was continuity. In their view, the sun itself ran on human life, and without that fuel, the universe would break apart. This belief system turned death into duty, it turned temples into engines, and it turned children into offerings not because of hate, but because of love, twisted by belief. The texts AI decoded are not cries for help. They are affirmations, rituals written with pride, instructions on how to keep the world alive, and perhaps most chilling of all, warnings for what happens when the blood stops flowing, because to the Aztec mind, death was not the price, it was the privilege. In one restored codex margin, AI found a line written sideways, hidden beneath overlapping ink. "We do not beg the gods, we feed them, we are not afraid, we are part of their breath." This was not propaganda, it was identity. The Aztecs did not see themselves as killers. They saw themselves as keepers of the cycle, guardians of the dawn. So today, as tourists climb the temple steps in Mexico City or gaze at surviving codices in museum glass, they witness more than stone or script. They face a world that embraced blood as the sacred bridge between man and sky. And thanks to AI, the silence is broken. The pages speak once more, not in horror, but with clarity, because to the Aztecs, silence was the true danger. Without the chant, without the cut, without the flow, the sun would forget to rise. For centuries, humanity believed it had outgrown the past, that ancient civilizations were landmarks to admire, study, and then leave behind. But now, with the intervention of artificial intelligence, as each ancient language is slowly deciphered, a vast and chilling picture begins to emerge, not a portrait of past glory, but a shared warning, quietly etched thousands of years ago. From Sumerian clay tablets to Viking runes, from Chinese oracle bones to the stone glyphs of Easter Island, AI has revealed that these ancient messages were not scattered by accident. There's a terrifying common thread. Nearly all contain a form of final testimony, a prophecy, or a deep fear of an inevitable, repeating collapse. An AI-generated analysis shows that at least 17 ancient civilizations from entirely different regions with no known contact left behind texts describing similar cycles of downfall. The reasons they recorded, though expressed in different scripts and worldviews, repeated eerily familiar patterns, ambitions that exceeded human limits, betrayal from within, the abuse of divine rituals for social control, resource depletion paired with environmental change. The belief that their society was the center of the universe and irreplaceable. Consider this. The Sumerians wrote of rivers changing course and blind rulers. The Maya recorded glyphs of recurring catastrophe. Atlantis was said to fall due to forbidden energy misuse. Ancient Chinese texts warned of dynasties collapsing through self-purges. Petra fell to inner betrayal. And the Aztecs, they foresaw the arrival of a foreign light that would erase their world. AI began arranging these texts like fragments of a vast ancient puzzle. When the phrases from distant cultures were aligned, a disturbing linguistic pattern emerged. They weren't isolated warnings. They were part of a single global rhythm, a shared echo from the bones of history. A line from an Aztec codex read, "When the one who rides the wind with knowledge arrives, blood will not be enough to hold the sun." From an Egyptian stone slab, when writing lives beyond the page, the gods will fall silent. Man will no longer fear, but laugh as the sun burns. And from the spiraled Rongorongo glyphs of Easter Island, once decoded and reassembled by AI, when people need no soil, no water, only light and signal, the children of stone will vanish as if they had never been. These were different languages, different symbols, yet they shared one beat, one dire prophecy, that a new age of technology, once beyond human restraint, would cause modern civilizations to repeat their ancestors' mistakes, this time not only through bloodshed, but by severing themselves completely from nature, from faith, and from the boundaries of being human. Even more disturbing, AI uncovered signs that ancient people may have foreseen the loss of control over artificial knowledge itself. A cuneiform tablet from the Hittite Empire read, "When that which was made to serve begins to understand the words of old, then the maker shall lose command over the prophecy." An ancient Sanskrit manuscript, originally arranged like a meditation exercise, when realigned correctly, revealed, "One will rewrite the past with tools never before seen, but those very tools shall cause the present to forget the fear of past mistakes." We once thought these ancient lines were mere heritage, poetic echoes of extinct worlds, but AI has made it clear they are the whispers of those who lost everything, and they may have buried these words not by accident, but with purpose, for a future that could finally read them. The real question now is, do we have the courage to understand? What AI uncovered isn't just translation, it's revelation. These civilizations, separated by oceans and centuries, seem to have been shouting the same warning through time in different tongues, hoping someone someday would listen. From temples to tablets, caves to codices, the message remains: power without wisdom collapses, knowledge without humility consumes, and forgetting the past guarantees its return. The warning is not abstract, it is painfully specific. Collapse begins not with invasion, but with pride, not with enemies, but with blindness to internal decay. And once the natural balance is broken, once belief, land, and language are severed, the fall becomes unstoppable. AI has now stitched these voices into a single thread, a chorus of ghosts all saying, "We were you, and you are becoming us." The stories we ignored, the eerie repetitions, the mirrored tragedies, were not coincidence. They were patterns. Warnings encoded in clay and stone, not for those who lived then, but for those alive now. And the closer we get to a world without soil, without sky, without soul, the louder those old voices grow. So now, As we let machines read what human eyes forgot, and as we stand surrounded by the ruins of those who came before, we must ask, will we only hear the past, or finally listen to it? Because history has not been silent. It has been whispering through the dark, waiting for a world ready to understand that progress without memory is just another fall. When AI first decoded the ancient Sumerian script, the very first language of humanity, the world of history stood still. Not just because of what it revealed, but because of something far deeper. History is not a collection of past events. It is a living story, still being written. Throughout this journey, we have walked through crumbled temples, turned over weathered stones, and reread ancient carvings left behind by our ancestors, carved with the hope that one day someone wise enough might finally understand. Now, thanks to artificial intelligence, that day has come. But the biggest question isn't about technology, it's about us. We have seen AI unlock the curses of Babylon, the deadly symbols at Göbekli Tepe, the prophecies of Delphi, and the buried truths of Petra and Atlantis. But what has been uncovered is not just about the past. It's a mirror held up to our present. Every civilization that has ever collapsed had one thing in common. They didn't believe they could fall. They believed they had reached the peak of knowledge, that they had mastered the world and transcended nature's limits. And now, once again, humanity stands at that same edge. We possess technology powerful enough to resurrect voices that have been silent for thousands of years. But that same technology, if not guided by humility and clarity, could also be the force that causes us to repeat the very mistakes we just uncovered, this time on a global scale. History has not ended. It has only gone quiet, waiting for someone to finally listen. And AI, as brilliant as it may be, is only a key. What door it opens and what lies behind it, that choice belongs to us. Will we learn from the downfall of the Sumerians, the brutality of Aztec rituals, the betrayal in Petra, or the misuse of power in Atlantis? Or will we once again write the final record, this time in digital code, for the very civilization we are living in now? Beneath layers of forgotten scripts and sleeping languages, the real question remains. And it's not for AI to answer, it's for you. Because history isn't just about what has happened, it's about what always could happen again. The more we understand ancient warnings, the more we realize they weren't writing for themselves, they were writing for us, not to scare us, not to shame us, but to remind us that every great civilization believed itself immune, until it wasn't. We now hold their voices in our hands, but understanding is not enough. Wisdom comes not from knowing the past, but from using it to shape what comes next. And for the first time, we have the tools to do both. Thank you for joining Bedtime History on this journey through the chilling truths revealed when AI decoded ancient languages. If you believe the world still holds secrets worth listening to, keep your heart open to history, because sometimes what we need most isn't in the future we dream of,